Chosen one, when you walked away, they truly believed you were finished, that leaving everything behind would break you slowly until you came back the same way you left, confused and defeated. But what they didn't understand is that your silence was not loss. It was transformation, because while they expected you to fall apart, you were actually rebuilding yourself in ways they could not see or understand. And now, the same people who once underestimated your decision are quietly watching in shock as you rise without chasing, grow without noise, and win without needing validation from anyone, proving that what looked like your ending was actually the beginning of a completely new version of you that they will never be able to reach or control again. Chosen one, most people grow up believing that strength means staying no matter how painful things become, holding on even when they are being drained, disrespected, or slowly losing themselves. But the truth is that this kind of endurance is often just fear disguised as loyalty, fear of being alone, fear of starting over, or fear of letting go of what feels familiar. And that is why what you did was so powerful, because you broke that illusion completely. You didn't walk away because you were weak or because you couldn't handle the situation anymore. You walked away because you finally reached a level of clarity where you understood that no amount of effort can fix something that is not meant to grow with you. And that realization changed everything inside you, because for the first time you chose to protect your peace instead of sacrificing it. You chose to respect yourself instead of chasing approval, and you chose truth over comfort, even though it was the harder path. And what makes this even deeper is that your decision didn't come from a sudden reaction, but from a long process of trying, enduring, and giving more chances than most people would, which means by the time you left, you were no longer acting out of emotion but out of awareness. And that awareness is what turned your exit into a victory, because while others saw you leaving as a loss, you were actually reclaiming your energy, your identity, and your direction in life. And that single decision quietly shifted everything about you, the way you think, the way you carry yourself, and the way you move forward. Because once you realize that you have the strength to walk away from what is not right for you, you unlock a level of freedom and self-respect that most people spend their entire lives trying to find. Chosen one, what made your journey even more powerful was not just that you walked away, but how you chose to carry yourself after it. Because instead of explaining your side, defending your name, or trying to make people understand your decision, you embraced silence, and that silence became your strongest form of power. Because while others were speaking, assuming, and creating their own versions of the story, you were focused on healing, rebuilding, and finding clarity within yourself. And this is what most people fail to understand. Silence is not weakness. It is control. It is discipline. It is the ability to step back and not react, even when you have every reason to. And that level of restraint confuses people who expect you to argue or prove yourself, because when you don't respond, you take away their ability to define you. And instead, you allow your growth to speak for you over time, and slowly, without you saying a single word, people begin to notice the difference in you, the calmness in your presence, the way you no longer react the same, the way you carry a quiet confidence that doesn't seek attention. And that is when your silence becomes louder than any explanation ever could, because it forces others to reflect, to question their assumptions, and to realize that the person they thought they understood is no longer the same. And that is the kind of power that doesn't need noise to be felt. Chosen one, there comes a moment in your journey where something shifts so deeply inside you that it changes the way you see everything. And that moment is detachment. Not the kind that makes you cold or distant, but the kind that brings clarity, peace, and control over your own emotions. Because before this shift, You were connected to outcomes, to people, to expectations, and to the hope that things would eventually turn out the way you wanted, even when reality kept showing you otherwise, and that attachment kept you stuck, overthinking, overgiving, and constantly waiting for something to change. But when you finally detached, it wasn't because you stopped caring completely, it was because you started caring about yourself more. You began to understand that your peace is not something you can keep sacrificing just to maintain connections that are not growing with you. And this realization freed you in a way that is hard to explain but impossible to ignore, because suddenly you no longer needed closure from people who never had clarity. You no longer looked for respect from those who never valued you, and you no longer chased outcomes that were never truly meant for you. And in that space of detachment, you found a new level of strength where your emotions were no longer controlling your decisions. Instead, your awareness began guiding you, and this is what made you untouchable, not because you disappeared or isolated yourself, but because you evolved beyond the version of yourself that people were used to, the version that reacted, explained, and held on too tightly. And now, when people try to approach you the same way they used to, it no longer works because you are not operating from the same place anymore. You are grounded, you are clear, and you are no longer available for anything that disturbs your inner peace. And that shift alone places you on a completely different level, one where you are not easily affected, not easily shaken, and not easily pulled back into patterns you have already outgrown. And this is why detachment is not loss, it is power, because it allows you to move through life with calmness, confidence, and a deep understanding that not everything is meant to be held onto, and sometimes the greatest strength you can have is the ability to let go without losing yourself. Chosen one. There are moments in life when it feels like everything is being taken away from you at once. People leave, opportunities close, and the things you once depended on begin to fall apart. And in those moments, it is very easy to believe that you are losing, that something has gone wrong, or that you are being left behind. But the reality is much deeper than what you can see at the surface, because sometimes what is being removed from your life is not a punishment, but a form of protection and redirection towards something better that you cannot yet understand. And this pattern is something we can clearly see in the lives of the prophets. For example, when Prophet Yusuf, peace be upon him, was betrayed by his own brothers and thrown into a well, it looked like complete loss and abandonment. Then he was taken away from his home and later imprisoned despite his innocence. And from the outside, it seemed like his life was only getting worse, step by step, but every one of those painful moments was actually guiding him toward a position of honor and authority that he could have never reached otherwise. And in the same way, when Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was forced to leave Makkah, the place he loved deeply, it felt like a heartbreaking loss, but that migration became the turning point that led to the growth, strength, and establishment of a powerful community in Medina, proving that sometimes leaving what you love is necessary for becoming who you are meant to be. And this is exactly what happened in your own journey, because what you thought was loss was actually the removal of things that were quietly draining your peace, your focus, and your growth. And although it felt heavy at the time, it created space for clarity, strength, and alignment to enter your life. And slowly, without you even realizing it, your mindset changed, your heart became lighter, and your path started making more sense. And that is when you begin to understand that nothing was truly taken from you. You were being guided, shaped, and prepared for something greater, because sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as endings, and what feels like a setback is actually the beginning of a completely new direction that is far better than anything you were trying to hold on to. Chosen one, One of the most powerful and almost mysterious parts of your journey is that you didn't feel the need to announce your growth. You didn't gather people to witness your transformation. You didn't explain every lesson you learned or every pain you healed from. And yet somehow, without you saying much at all, people began to notice that something about you had completely changed, and this is what makes your evolution so different from the usual kind of change people are used to seeing. Because most people only recognize growth when it is loud, when it is shown off, when it is proven again and again through words and actions meant to gain attention. But your growth moved in silence. It happened in moments when no one was watching, in nights where you were alone with your thoughts, trying to make sense of everything you had been through. In times where you chose patience instead of reaction, in situations where you could have easily gone back to your old habits but decided to move differently. And that kind of growth builds something much deeper than surface-level change. It builds a new identity from within, and when that identity begins to take shape, it becomes impossible to hide, even if you try to stay quiet about it, because it starts showing in the way you carry yourself, in the way you respond to things that once triggered you, in the way you no longer feel the need to prove your worth to anyone, and in the way your presence itself begins to feel calm, grounded, and confident without being forced. And this is exactly what shocked people the most, because they expected you to come back louder, to defend yourself, to show them that you have changed. But instead, you came back different in a way that didn't need validation, a way that spoke through your energy, your mindset, and your consistency rather than your words. And that kind of quiet transformation creates a powerful contrast. Because the same people who once misunderstood you or underestimated you are now trying to understand what changed. They are observing you more closely, noticing small details, the way you no longer engage in unnecessary arguments, the way you protect your peace without explaining yourself, the way you move with intention instead of reacting emotionally. And all of this creates a silent impact that is far stronger than anything you could have said, because people don't just hear about your growth, they feel it. And when growth is felt, instead of explained, it carries a different kind of weight. It becomes undeniable. And what makes this even deeper is that you didn't grow to impress anyone. You didn't change to prove a point. You grew because you had no other choice. Because staying the same would have meant staying stuck in patterns that were holding you back. And once you started choosing yourself, once you started protecting your energy, once you started aligning your actions with your values, everything within you began to shift naturally. And this is why your growth feels so authentic and powerful, because it wasn't rushed, it wasn't forced, it was built through real experiences, real challenges, and real decisions that shaped you into someone stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. And now, even though you are not trying to be seen, you are being noticed more than ever, because there is something about a person who has healed, who has found peace within themselves, and who no longer depends on external validation that naturally draws attention. And this attention is different. It is not based on curiosity or temporary interest. It is based on respect, even from those who may never admit it openly, because deep down, people can recognize when someone has truly changed, and your silence makes it even more powerful because it leaves room for interpretation. It creates a sense of mystery, and it forces people to observe rather than assume. And over time, this quiet presence becomes your strongest message. It tells the story of everything you have been through without needing to explain a single detail. It reflects the discipline you built, the patience you practiced, and the mindset you developed. And that is why your growth became loud, even though you stayed quiet. Because real transformation does not need noise to be seen. It carries its own energy. It reveals itself through consistency, and it leaves an impact that words alone could never create. And as you continue on this path, You will realize that the less you try to prove, the more powerful you become, because your actions, your presence, and your inner peace will always speak louder than anything you could ever say. And that is the kind of growth that not only shocks people, but also changes the way they see you forever. Chosen one, there was a pattern in your life that many people around you became comfortable with, even if it was slowly breaking you from the inside. A pattern where you stayed longer than you should have, gave more than you received, kept understanding people who never tried to understand you, and held on to situations long after they had stopped bringing you peace. And the reason this pattern was so hard to break is because it didn't look wrong on the surface. It looked like loyalty, patience, kindness, and strength. But underneath all of that, it was costing you your energy, your clarity, and your sense of self. And over time, it created a cycle where you were always the one adjusting, always the one forgiving, always the one trying to fix things, while others became used to taking without giving, expecting without appreciating, and staying the same while you kept bending to make things work. And this is exactly why your decision to finally break that pattern was so powerful, because it didn't just change one situation, it disrupted an entire cycle that people had grown used to. And what made it even more shocking for them was that you didn't break it with anger. You didn't create chaos. You didn't try to get revenge or prove a point. Instead, you broke it with awareness, with a quiet understanding that you could no longer continue living in a way that was draining you. And that kind of shift is something most people don't expect, because they are used to patterns continuing. They are used to people staying the same. And when someone finally decides to move differently, it forces everyone around them to confront a reality they are not ready for. And that reality is that change is possible, that growth is real, and that the same person they once knew is no longer operating from the same mindset. And this is where things start to feel uncomfortable for others, because your growth becomes a mirror. It reflects back to them the things they have been avoiding, the patterns they are still stuck in, and the ways they have been benefiting from your old behavior. And even if they don't say it out loud, they feel that shift. They notice that you are no longer reacting the same way, no longer available in the same way, no longer willing to accept what you once tolerated. And that creates a silent tension, because they can no longer interact with you using the same approach. They can no longer rely on your old responses, and they can no longer predict you the way they used to. And this unpredictability is what unsettles them the most, because it takes away their sense of control and familiarity and replaces it with uncertainty. And at the same time, it establishes a new level of respect, even if it is unspoken. Because when someone breaks a pattern that most people stay trapped in for years, it shows a level of strength and awareness that is impossible to ignore. And the truth is, breaking that pattern was not easy for you either. It required you to face your own fears, to let go of what was familiar, to accept that some people might not understand your decision, and to trust that choosing yourself was worth the discomfort that came with it. And that is what makes your transformation so real, because it wasn't just about changing your actions, it was about changing the way you think, the way you value yourself, and the way you approach life. And once that internal shift happened, everything else followed naturally, because you could no longer go back to being the person you used to be. You could no longer ignore what you have now become aware of, and you could no longer settle for situations that do not align with your growth. And this is why breaking the cycle was not just a moment, it was a turning point, a decision that continues to shape your life every day. Because now, every choice you make is influenced by that awareness. Every boundary you set is a reflection of that growth, and every step you take forward is a reminder that you are no longer living on autopilot. You are living with intention. And as you continue on this path, you will notice that the same patterns that once felt impossible to escape no longer have any power over you. because you have already done the hardest part. You recognized them, you confronted them, and you chose to break free. And that is something most people never find the courage to do. And that is why your journey stands out. Not because it is perfect, but because it is real, it is honest, and it is built on the kind of growth that transforms not just your circumstances, but your entire way of being. And once you reach that level, there is no going back, only forward, with clarity, strength, and a deep understanding that you are no longer repeating the past. You are creating a completely new path for yourself. Chosen one. What you once thought was the end of your story was actually the quiet beginning of the most powerful chapter of your life. But at the time you couldn't see it that way, because endings never feel like beginnings when you are standing inside them. They feel like loss, like confusion, like a sudden emptiness where something once existed, and when you walked away, it felt like you were leaving behind not just people or situations, but a version of yourself that had become familiar, a version that knew how to survive in that environment, even if it was not truly growing. And stepping out of that space required more than just a decision. It required faith in something you could not yet see. It required trusting that there is more for you beyond what you were used to, even when there was no clear proof in front of you. And that is what made your exit so powerful, because it was not driven by certainty, it was driven by inner conviction, a deep feeling that staying would cost you more than leaving ever could. And even though the outside world may have interpreted your departure as an ending, what was really happening was a complete shift in your direction, a redirection toward a path that was always meant for you, but could not open until you let go of what was holding you back. As time began to pass, you started to notice something slowly changing within you, not in a dramatic or sudden way, but in a quiet, steady transformation that reshaped how you think, how you feel, and how you respond to life itself. And this is where your real story began, because for the first time, you were no longer reacting based on past patterns or emotional attachments. You were moving with awareness, with intention, and with a level of clarity that you did not have before. And this clarity allowed you to see things for what they truly are, not what you hoped they would be. And that alone freed you from so many invisible chains that once controlled your decisions. And as you continued to grow in this new space, you began to build a stronger connection with yourself. You started to understand your worth without needing anyone else to confirm it. And you began to create boundaries that protected your peace instead of constantly sacrificing it. And this internal shift became the foundation of your new life. A life that is no longer based on seeking validation or approval, but on alignment, purpose, and inner stability. What makes this chapter even more powerful is that it did not require you to force anything. You did not have to chase opportunities. You did not have to prove your value to the world. And you did not have to convince anyone of who you have become. Because when you align yourself internally, things begin to fall into place externally in ways that feel almost effortless. And this is something that many people struggle to understand because they are used to forcing outcomes, controlling situations, and constantly trying to make things happen. But your journey showed you a different way, a way where you focus on your growth, your mindset, and your connection with your purpose. And, as a result, the right opportunities, the right people, and the right paths begin to appear naturally, not all at once, but in a sequence that makes sense over time. And this process builds a kind of confidence that is very different from what most people experience, because it is not based on external success, it is based on internal alignment. And that kind of confidence is unshakable because it does not depend on circumstances. It comes from knowing that you are exactly where you need to be, even if everything is still unfolding. At the same time, as you continue to grow and move forward, the people who once knew you begin to notice the difference. And this is where things become even more interesting, because they are trying to understand how you became this version of yourself without them witnessing the process. They are trying to figure out what changed, what happened, and how you managed to rise without making noise. And this creates a sense of curiosity, confusion, and sometimes even admiration, because your transformation does not fit into the usual patterns they are familiar with. You did not follow the expected path, you did not seek attention, and you did not return to explain yourself. You simply moved forward and allowed your actions, your energy, and your presence to speak for you. And that is what makes your story so impactful, because it shows that real growth does not need to be announced. It reveals itself through consistency, through behavior, and through the way you carry yourself in every situation. Another powerful aspect of this new chapter is that you are no longer the same person who started the journey. And this may seem obvious, but the depth of this change is something that cannot be fully understood unless experienced, because it is not just about becoming stronger or more confident. It is about becoming more aware, more grounded, and more in control of your own life. It is about understanding that your value is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to see yourself. And this understanding allows you to move through life with a sense of calm that is not easily disturbed, because you are no longer tied to outcomes, you are no longer dependent on validation, and you are no longer afraid of walking away from anything that does not align with who you have become. And this level of freedom is something that many people search for but never find, because it requires letting go of attachments, expectations, and old identities that feel comfortable but limit your growth. As this chapter continues to unfold, you also begin to see opportunities and possibilities that were not visible to you before. And this is not because they suddenly appeared out of nowhere, but because your perspective has changed. You are now able to recognize what aligns with you and what does not. You are able to make decisions based on clarity rather than emotion, and you are able to move forward without being held back by the past. And this shift in perspective opens doors that once seemed closed. It creates paths that once seemed impossible, and it allows you to step into a version of your life that is more aligned with your true purpose. And while this journey is still ongoing, one thing becomes very clear. You are no longer living the same story. You are writing a new one that is based on growth, awareness, and intentional living. And perhaps the most important part of all of this is that you now understand something that many people never realize, and that is the fact that endings are not always what they seem. Sometimes they are not endings at all. They are transitions, they are shifts, they are moments where life is guiding you away from what is familiar and toward what is meant for you. And while this process can feel uncomfortable, uncertain, and even painful at times, it is also necessary for your growth, because without it, you would remain in the same place, repeating the same patterns, and never discovering your true potential. And this is why your exit was not just a moment. It was a transformation, a turning point that set everything else in motion. And as you continue to move forward, you will carry this understanding with you. You will recognize that every challenge, every ending, and every unexpected change has the potential to lead you somewhere greater. And this awareness will allow you to navigate life with a level of confidence and trust that is rooted not in external circumstances, but in your own inner strength and clarity. So when you look back at the moment you walked away, you no longer see it as a loss. You see it as the beginning of everything that came after, the moment where you chose growth over comfort, truth over illusion, and yourself over everything that was holding you back. And that is why your story is so powerful, because it is not just about walking away. It is about what happens after. It is about the transformation that follows, the growth that unfolds, and the life that is created when you have the courage to step into the unknown and trust that something greater is waiting for you on the other side. And now, as you continue on this path, one thing is certain: you are no longer the person who needed to hold on. You are the person who knows when to let go, when to move forward, and when to trust that what is meant for you will always find its way to you. And that is the kind of power that turns endings into beginnings and transforms ordinary moments into extraordinary turning points that shape the rest of your life. Chosen one. If you look back at everything now, you will start to understand something very simple but very powerful. Nothing in your journey was random, nothing was wasted, and nothing truly ended the way it first appeared to end. What felt like people leaving you was actually life, removing what could not grow with you anymore. What felt like silence was actually protection, giving you space to hear your own thoughts again. What felt like loss was actually redirection, pushing you away from what was familiar so you could finally step into what was meant for you. And the most important truth of all is this: you didn't become stronger because life became easier. You became stronger because you stopped running from the truth of what needed to change. Now you are standing in a different place, not because the world suddenly became kinder, but because you became wiser. You no longer chase what drains you. You no longer explain yourself to people who already decided not to understand you. You no longer stay where your soul feels small just to keep appearances alive. And that shift is what makes everything different now. The same situations that once controlled your emotions no longer have power over you, because you are no longer the same person who entered them. And maybe the most beautiful part of your journey is this: you didn't need to become loud to be noticed. You didn't need to prove your worth to be valuable. And you didn't need to fight for every place you were never meant to stay in. Your growth spoke for you. Your silence protected you. Your distance healed you. And your patience rebuilt you in ways nobody can fully see, but everyone can feel. So when you think about everything that happened, understand this clearly: you didn't lose your way. You found it. You didn't fall behind. You stepped away from what was holding you back. And you didn't walk away empty. You walked away carrying something far more powerful than anything you left behind yourself. Fully aware, fully awake, and finally aligned with where you are meant to go next.